Hi, this is your host Sapnil Bharti, and we are at the end of 2020 and almost there with 2021. Today we have with us a wizard from Percona, Matt Yonkovit, Chief Experience Officer. Matt, you are holding a crystal ball to give us a peek into 2021. But before we go there, I would love to learn from you, what is Percona all about?
Thanks. I'm glad to be here, Swapnil. Percona has been around for about 14 years now. We are an open source database expertise shop. And so our focus is on keeping open source databases open and providing people with an alternative to a lot of the bigger vendors that are out there who are providing open source databases. So we have our own versions of MySQL, Postgres, and MongoDB that provide the community with features in the free space that they could normally not get. So our focus is really on enabling people to do more with open source databases.
Now, you can grab your crystal ball and tell us what predictions do you have for 2021?
Well, I think there's a few things that we're all tracking, and these are things that aren't necessarily new, but we're seeing them accelerate quite a bit. One of the big ones that we're seeing is the drive towards easy hosting or the as a service lifestyle. And so this has been something that we've been seeing for quite some time, right? But this is having a profound impact on the database space because databases are really becoming a commodity in the latest iterations. So we're seeing a lot of the operational roles that people generally held around the databases start to evolve into more SREs or more specialists because now developers are now empowered to choose their own databases. And that's driving this new technology inheritance issue that I'm seeing, which is now all of a sudden the people who have to maintain the software aren't the people choosing the technology stacks anymore. So you're getting DBAs who don't have any experience in open source databases now responsible for maintaining them. And we're seeing this huge growth in the number of technologies that people have to support. What we're seeing is the developers don't want to have to do that back-end stuff anymore. They don't want to have to worry about it, and so it just gets thrown over the wall. And now the DBAs who have this background in tuning and performance tuning and the sysadmins, they have to turn into that SRE type role because it's not just about the database or the infrastructure because the cloud providers do it all. So the other thing that we're seeing is the de-evolution, that's what I'm calling it, of the openness in open source. Now, that might sound surprising because, hey, can you really have true open source that isn't really open? And the answer is yes. What we're seeing now is a lot of database vendors are being protectionist against that cloud movement. And so we're seeing a lot of changes to not only the licensing structure, but people are starting to reserve features outside of the open source space for their as a service offerings. So when you look at Oracle's, for instance, MySQL service, they're now having an analytics engine. MongoDB is reserving features for MongoDB Atlas. So we're starting to see this openness drive start to dry up in some of the classic open source vendors, which is actually a crazy trend. But it's the same time we're seeing the evolution for some cloud providers start to be more open. So you get this kind of reverse trend from both sides, where one side is trying to say, oh, let's go more closed source. Let's protect ourselves from being too open or I've heard people call it strip mining of open source. Whereas the other side is saying we need to be more open. We need to be more community focused and give more back. The next bold prediction here is, and I don't know how bold this is. This is actually something that's been happening again for a while, but databases are starting to catch up to where applications are in the run anywhere movement in that cloud native department, right? So when you start to look at the different companies that are out there, you're starting to enable people to run anywhere. And that means multi-cloud. That means multi-data center. That means hybrid. That means all these different environments. That means that you're going to start treating databases like the herd as opposed to this individual, type thing. And that's leading to a giant growth amount of the number of databases and the amount of data that we're having to manage. And if you look at things like, enterprise companies, enterprise companies are jumping on this bandwagon. A company like Nutanix, for instance, they've got their own, platform where you can run your database anywhere. And it's that mini database as a service. Red Hat is, investing a ton in their OpenShift environments, and they have a lot of database support, and we're even working with them about that. You've also got AWS, you've got Google and Anthos, and you've got Azure Arc, all these different, technologies that are enabling people to run their, quote unquote, infrastructure anywhere, are now starting to look at the database because databases are that key component at the center of all this. And so you're starting to see this, trend. And here's a bold prediction for you, right? So when the database providers are starting to look at this, they're looking at it like, how can we consolidate on this single database? Whereas the cloud providers are saying, how can we get as many people to run on our platform as possible, but as many databases? Consolidation's bound to happen. So yes, will it happen? I don't know, but I think you're going to start to see some of these database open source companies get gobbled up by the big cloud vendors. So could it be Microsoft owns MongoDB, a Microsoft company? It could be. Or Elastic, an AWS company. These are things that I think are bound to happen in the next few years. Will it happen in 2021? Probably not. But within the next 3 or 4 years, I could totally see these open source companies becoming part of those cloud vendors' portfolios. Because of the explosive growth in the data management space, you're going to see a ton of innovation. You've already seen it, right? So you've seen companies like CockroachDB or Yugabyte join into the open source, realm. You've seen new databases, like even in the last few years, when you look at like Grafana, Prometheus, you look at time series databases, all of these things have been growing because as the environments expand, as you have to manage more data, as you have to manage more environments, you need new tooling. You need new things in your toolbox, in your arsenal to help solve these problems. And of course, data is so incredibly important to everyone's infrastructure and their business plans. You have to have innovation in this space to keep up with those challenges.
Matt, can you share with us what is going to be the focus of Percona in 2021?
Our focus in 2021 is really about enabling companies and consumers and users to move faster and to unlock what vendors are locking in. So we're building, for instance, our own database as a service engine that will allow you to run database as a service wherever you want. We're building it on top of Kubernetes. We're using common open components so people can take it and run it without having to get locked into other vendors' proprietary infrastructure.
Awesome, Matt. Thank you so much for not only talk about the ecosystem in general, where we are heading in 2020, but also share the focus of Percona. And you have made some very valid and great points about open source in general. What are the things we should be worried about and trends that are going to there that we should be keeping out for. So once again, Matt, thank you for your prediction. And I look forward to see you again at some point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wapil.